Okay, so for question 1, there were a lot of mistakes that happened here, so please make sure to review this video a couple times and review your block notes to make sure that you know how to evaluate rational expressions. So to start with, a lot of you guys, and most of you guys knew to do a root, but when there's a negative number and there's a bracket, you have to keep that bracket. You can't just get rid of it. Now the next part I found was interesting was that a lot of you guys were putting 3 in the wrong spot. That number goes inside the root, so it's the third root of negative 125 to the power of 4. So it is extremely important for you to know where things go, otherwise it's going to be wrong. So if you switch those two numbers, you're going to get a very different answer. So I'm just going to go ahead and evaluate 125 to the power of 4. When you multiply negative number 4 times, it actually switches to a positive. So it's a really large number, 244,140,625. Don't forget to extend the root. And then when you do the cubic root of that, the cubic root of your answer should be 625. Now, it cannot be negative 625 because if you multiply negative 625 3 times, it won't give you the positive that we need inside this bracket. So a reminder, you put plus or minus only when the root is an even number. So a square root, a fourth root, a sixth root, and so on and so forth. Okay, so for B, there's a negative here. Now I would just scratch it out and put it at the top so that it shouldn't confuse you if you leave it at the top. So this negative exponent here means that we're going to have to flip the fraction. A lot of you guys knew that. When I flip the fraction, the negative should remain at the top. The exponent just becomes positive. You don't flip the exponent. So the next part of this would be to distribute the 2 over 5 to both expressions. Now because negative 243 is in a bracket, I have to keep it in a bracket. You guys have a bad habit of getting rid of the bracket at this point. Now the bracket at the bottom is not really necessary because it's just a positive number. But when it's a negative number, it makes a huge difference. So a reminder that when you have exponents with roots, exponents with fractions, it creates roots. So we're going to keep the fraction, or keep the brackets and the negative number. I like to just keep the brackets whenever it's in brackets. It just becomes a habit. The bottom number, the denominator, goes as the 5th root, and the top number goes as the exponent. So hopefully you fix that on your quiz. That happens for both the top and the bottom. So when I do negative 243 to the power of 2, I know it's going to give me a positive number because it's multiplying a negative times a negative. So we've got 59,049. All that divided by the 5th root of 32 to the power of 2. 32 to the power of 2 is 1,024. And now you just evaluate the 5th root. So if I do the 5th root of 59,049, it gives me 9. And if I do the 5th root of 1,024, it gives me 4. So 9 over 4 is the answer here. The answer is not negative because when you square when you square a negative, you multiply negative times a negative, it becomes a positive. So you have to be very careful with that negative. It doesn't mean you can't do it. You just have to be keeping your brackets and being very careful with your work. Find 2 coterminal angles. I'm not going to do this one because that one was fine. If you still struggle with it, please see Miss Riley during this period. Find DC. I'm also not going to do this one. Most of the answers were okay. If you need some help, find someone in the classroom that can explain how to do this. Just know that this is equal to 10 centimeters. Also for solving the triangle, the only thing I'm worried about is you guys not using the concluding chart. Okay, so you've got sides, you've got angles. So at the end, I'm basically looking for side B, I'm looking for side C, and I'm looking for side D. The angles, it's the same thing except capital letters. And make sure that this is very clear. Those that are given don't need an approximate symbol. B is 12.0 meters, but we know that C needs to be found, so it will probably have an approximate. And I'm assuming as well, unless it's exact, angle B and angle D will also have approximate, so you need a dot above the equal sign. So again, if you need some help finding the answers here, please see someone in the classroom. There are many people who got it correct, so please go communicate or talk to Miss Riley for some extra help. For solving the following equations, this wasn't too bad. The first one was a big problem. A lot of people realized that there was a common factor, but didn't common factor properly. So when you common factor, you put that common factor in the front, and then you divide both by 7. So it's w squared minus 4. Now, I put an equal sign right here, and I wasn't supposed to because I need the equal sign that's right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and erase that. Now we have a totally new expression. This is factoring, but we're not quite done factoring. There's a couple different ways you can do this. You can put your arrow and put w squared minus 4 equals 0. If you want to solve for w squared, you just add 4 on both sides. Square root to get rid of the squared, and here's where the problem became. A lot of people did not do the plus or minus. Because there's a square right here, it's a square root, you have to do the plus or minus. So for your therefore statement, you have to tell me w1 equals 2, w2 equals negative 2. Now another way of doing this would be to use difference of squares. So at this point, you're not really done factoring. You could continue factoring. I'm just going to do it over here. So w squared minus 4 equals 0. This is two terms. You can do the square root of w, and you can do the square root of 4. So that means that we have w minus 2 and w plus 2 as an extended factored form. So from here, you take your answers, the ones that have variables in the brackets, so there's 2 brackets this time. You set them both equal to 0 because that's what solving is. If you were just factoring, you would stop right here. But we're continuing with solving, and in this case we're going to add 2 to each side, so w1 is positive 2, and w2 means that I subtract 2 on each side, so it's negative 2. Okay. Now this is the exact same thing. It's a difference of squares, so you can give it a try and maybe ask Miss Riley if it's correct, but I need you to find a way to tell if it's correct or not. You can also FOIL here to make sure that you get the correct answer at the top, and FOIL again to make sure that you get 7w squared minus 28. Now these ones were well done, okay? X squared minus 5x plus 6. Some of you guys forgot to solve, so at the end, I need a therefore statement with 2 answers, okay? So W or N or whatever, I need 2 answers. In this case, I believe the answer was x1 equals 3 and x2 equals 2. So at least you have the answers. You have to factor using ACB. The answer for D, x1 equals negative 2 over 3, and x2 is equal, oh sorry, no, it's positive 2 over 3, and x2 is negative 5. Now, this is the same ACB chart, but you have to use decomposition. If you don't use decomposition, when you go to FOIL out your answer, it won't work. So you have to use decomposition for this question. Now, some of you guys still struggle a lot with decomposition. So here's where I think you should go if that's happening. Go to videos and factoring by decomposition. There's an example there. So you need to practice even more. If I scroll down to the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and do these 2 examples just so that you know exactly what I'm looking for. I mean, I already did an example, but I'll do another one here, so for those who want an extra example. So we've got a point that's given. It's the point negative 4, 3. So negative 4, 3 is found right here. So you can create your line that goes to the origin. There are still people doing this. That is not okay. The triangle has to be created with the initial arm, which is the x-axis. Your triangle has to look this way. So in this case here, I'm going to go ahead and put that x equals negative 4, y equals 3. If you put your x and y in the wrong spot, you're going to have problems. So make sure you know which one's x, which one's y, and which one's the radius. So we need to find the radius in exact form. To find the radius, we have to use Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which we can turn into the equation of a circle which has the origin at 0, 0. So the origin here is 0, 0. Remember that there is a circle that could be drawn, possibly. And that's where we get the equation of a circle. So we do 3 squared plus, don't forget the bracket when you're substituting, because when you go to square a negative, it will give you a positive. So 16 plus 9 is 25. And when I do the square root, yes, it gives me a positive and a minus, but you have to tell me that we use the positive value. Okay, so sorry, this shouldn't be a C, it should be an R at this point. Okay, so it's right here. All those should be radiuses. If you keep it as C, it's okay, but it would be best if you put a R for radius. So a lot of you guys found the radius, but forgot to find the measure of the angle. I'm looking for this angle right here. So if I'm looking for that angle, I'm going to have to label my sides. This is the, sorry, that's not the hypotenuse. This is the hypotenuse, because the right angle is right here. Across from my angle is the opposite, and this is the adjacent. So if I'm finding theta, I'm given the opposite and the adjacent, which means I'm going to use tan of theta, because I don't have the angle, equals opposite over adjacent. The opposite is 3, and the adjacent is -4. A lot of you guys got that mixed up. So just be very careful when you do that. So then you're going to do theta equals the inverse operation of tan, which is tan -1, and 3 divided by -4. And in this case, we end up getting an answer. Tan -1 of 3 divided by -4. Tan -1, 3 divided by -4 of -36.9. So -36.9 degrees. Now it does say -36.8. However, after the 8 there's a 6, so you have to round properly. Don't forget your therefore statement. This is where most people went wrong. The radius was not really a problem. It's equal to 5. But theta is a positive angle. Angles can't be negative. So you have to make sure that you give me the positive degree for your therefore statement. I know that it gives you a negative answer here, but that's only because of where the angle is. So I need you to realize that 36.9 is a positive angle in your therefore statement. Number 7 was kind of a disaster. This is why I'm making this video. Hopefully it will help you. We want to draw 240 degrees on a coordinate system. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and draw that. So here's y, here's x, and 240 degrees lands right about here, I would say. Okay, so there's a point on this terminal arm, which is the point xy, which means that you need an x value. Again, don't draw your triangle with the y-axis. You need to draw your triangle with the x-axis. Okay, it has to be drawn with the x-axis, and it has to be a right angle triangle. We don't have x, but we do know that x will be negative because it's on the negative x-axis. We also don't have y, but we know that y is going to be negative. A lot of you guys forgot that. And theta is this, okay? That's what we're looking for. Now, this is 240 degrees. So if we're looking for theta, we need to be able to find it, which means if the whole thing is 240 degrees, you need to take away just this little part. And that little part is equal to 180 degrees. So we subtract 240 and 180, and we get 30 degrees. 60 degrees, sorry. Okay. So I'm going to actually erase that theta, and I'm going to put a 60 degrees. Now you have to think logically. This is the part where most people went wrong. A lot of people were able to find 60 degrees. However, to find x, you have a right angle triangle. We've been working with SOHCAHTOA for so long now. You have to remember to do sine and cos. If you do tan, it's not going to help you, and I'll explain why. So this is the negative x. That's negative y, and this is the radius, which is actually equal to 1 because we're on the unit circle. So if we do sine, since it's a 90-degree angle of 60 degrees, I mean, there's nothing else you can do here unless you use sine and cos. So if you label hypotenuse, adjacent, and opposite, it might give you a hint as to do sine of 60. Well, sine of 60 is opposite over hypotenuse. The opposite